huge tip. The interview begins
as soon as you leave the house.
Anything they wanted to ask you. One of my go-to reasons is because of company culture. Like, I'm not going to apply just anywhere. Scary. Hi everyone, and welcome to Apprenticeish, where we talk all about apprentices, apprenticeships, kind of. Team, Happy New Year. It has been a whole minute and I'm so sorry for taking so long to film this video. I am going to insert the usual disclaimer. Just in case you guys did not know, but this is the third and final part of a 3-part series. The first part was about the overview process. The second part was about the application itself. And the third part, which is this video, is all about the interviewing section of the Solicitor Apprenticeship application process. The first thing to note is the interview begins as soon as you leave your house. Like, we are not wasting any time. I filmed this video twice already, and I went into a bit more detail about why it's so important to treat your interview as starting as soon as you leave your house. I won't go into too much detail here, but what I will say is that I've heard multiple stories of people who are like rude to people that were on public transport or on their way to the interview, didn't realize that that was the same person who was going to be their interviewer, didn't get the job based off of that, or they've been really rude to the receptionist or just people that they've encountered whilst walking into the building, stepping on the premises, and haven't gotten the job for that reason. I'm not saying that this will definitely be the case here, but just to cover all ground, like, why would you just be rude to someone? Especially on the day of your interview. Like, you just never know who you're going to encounter. So that is a huge tip. The interview begins
as soon as you leave the house.
Points number 2
are the basics.
So this is just stuff that you would already know and have already heard, but just generic things. So make sure that you're dressed appropriately. I would always say, if you're unsure, go for a bit more formal than be underdressed, because the underdressed vibe might not be appropriate for the firm that you're going, or the company that you're going for, or it might be appropriate. You won't know if you don't already know. But yeah, I would always say going a bit more formal is always a bit safer. Obviously, make sure you brush your teeth. You know, no one should be falling down when you say,
"Hello, my name is."
Scary. Just other stuff like make sure your phone is on silent or do not disturb. I would also say you're in the mood to be in an interview. Like, listen to any music you need to, disregard anything that has happened earlier that day or anything that's happened earlier that week. Make sure you go in with a positive mind and a positive vibe. Would last but not least say, like, obviously if your interview is online, then just make sure you do like an internet test to make sure that your internet's fine and working, especially for videos, and that your audio and headsets are working. I don't know what's going on in this panorama the moment you see this video, but what I will say is just make sure you cover all ground. The third part is the tests. So whether it's online or in person, I have heard that, you know, there's most likely to be a test section. So this could be in the form of a written essay question. So it could be about a specific, I don't know, something that they've experienced before. It could be a problem question, could be like a literal essay question. So what do you think about this topic? It might not be like law specific, and I'm not entirely sure that they're expecting that because you would not have done your law degree. But just perhaps areas around law, or like typical legal questions that can be debated without prior legal knowledge. Like, what do you think about prisoners having rights, for example? And then the other part will be the maths test, the maths equation section. As you can tell, actually I really loved maths, so that is a fun fact. I really actually enjoyed maths because of one maths teacher. She had changed my attitude to maths entirely. But what I will say is that make sure you brush up on like basic maths. Like, don't let the interview be the first time you're doing like maths, division, multiplication, except, I don't know, speed, distance, time. You never know what's going to come up on that. Just review basic maths before you get into the interview, because I'm just saying, you never know what will come up. I'm not going to say too much, but I've said enough. I think the last point that I would say, like, surrounding the test bit, like the maths and English test bit, is make sure you read the question and make sure you answer the question. I was doing an interview and part of the process was the maths test. I didn't realize that half of it was calculator. But I was sitting there figuring everything out in my head against the clock. And yeah, I just didn't, well, hey, I got here. But the fact of the matter is, you know, just make sure that you've actually read the question. The next part is to do with interviews. Sorry, it's not to do with interviews. It's to do with So when you are going to do a interview, a part of that process might be a group project, a group collaboration situation going on all up in there. So you will be placed in a group. Essentially how it could work, obviously, again, I always say this, the company can do this any which way they want to, but you could be in a group. They give you a scenario and then they ask you to speak about that scenario. When you speak about that scenario based on your discussion, you'll give a presentation at the end about what your answer is or solution is to the problem. Now, there are many scary things that happen in this particular section of the interview. I've heard some very interesting stories, people becoming extremely controlling, trying to decide like the group narrative. And the reason why this is a bit problematic, I'm saying a bit to tone it down.
Hello. We're in this situation again, aren't we? You haven't subscribed, have you? Very mad behaviour. Do you know what, in fact, I feel like you should leave a comment down below. That would mean so much to me. In fact, have you even liked the video? I'm out here putting like 10 hours worth of editing into this 10-minute video probably. You can't even comment, you can't even like, you can't even subscribe, click the little bell icon. It's free. Yeah, how about that? It's free. Well, I'll let you get back into the video, but you know, the button has never moved, will not move, has never moved, and I want you to enjoy the video, okay, bye?
Because when you're a solicitor apprentice, at least in my experience, there will be a lot of like collaboration and group work with your team. You are not a qualified solicitor at this point. You need to be able to communicate with your team and collaborate with them on whatever task you're working on if required. So this is a very important part of the process, and people do tend to show their true colors. So I think if you can, try to be yourself as much as possible. Like, don't clam up in those situations, but I would definitely say be very self-aware. Be very self-aware. And I think that goes without saying, in not just in that environment, but in any like team collaborative environment. Take note of the different personalities that you'll be working with and try to respond to them with the appropriate response. So if you see someone in the group who is a bit more quiet,
don't just ignore them. That's rude.
They might have a lot to say, but just need some encouragement to do that. So for you to be able to like bounce off of different people and how they interact with each other, it is a very good skill to develop. And I would say is actually very vital in team and group activities. Not everybody works the same. And I'm not saying you need to suddenly be a pro at team working, but it is extremely important. Now, I say this all to say, whilst you are doing this group activity, this group collaboration, project, presentation, discussion, whatever it is, make sure that you are taking note of the different areas that you would improve. This will kind of lead into the next section, which is the one-to-one interview or the panel interview. But a part of that process might be, sorry, I'm like playing around with this. A part of that process might be them asking you to give feedback based on what you literally just spoke about. What would you change about that discussion? What would you have added to that presentation? Did you have any additional points about the flying cars? So I think just be prepared and be alert and ready to give feedback on not only your performance, but also how the group could have worked better together. The one-to-one interview / panel interview, again, they could literally ask you anything they wanted to. Anything they wanted to ask you. If they have any doubts, concerns, queries about you and your application, they will most likely get it out there. Make sure that you, number one, have, like, outside of what I literally just said about the group activity, make sure that you know the answer to just generic questions. Why do you want to do the apprenticeship? Why didn't you go to uni? I've covered all of these different points in the I think in the first video or the second video, probably the second video actually. And I would try to say as best as you can, like, review your application before going into the interview, just because they might ask you questions about your it's not called a CV, about your application. So they might literally go through your questions and answers, and it's worth making sure that your answers are actually in line. So, for example, if you say, like, my favourite area of law is X, Y, and Z, and then you go in the interview and say, like, 5 completely opposite, like, for example, if you say criminal law is my favourite area of law, go into the interview and say commercial law is my favourite area of law.
They are quite different.
So just making sure that you're being consistent there. And I would probably say as well, you have to, like, encourage yourself and make sure you put your best foot forward there. And I said this in the last video, they're not going to know how good you are unless you show them how good you are. Obviously, yes. I'm not saying, like, you know, be overconfident, like,
I'm the best thing ever.
In my head, that's what I think before I go in the interview. You have to tell fear to be quiet. Obviously, be humble. We're not trying to bring out any pride. As far as you can, like, be confident without being cocky. No one likes a cocky person. Sorry, the last thing, which is something that I think people should be doing but don't really do, which is make sure that you actually research the firm, like, know what firm you're applying to, know what areas of law they deal with, famous cases that they might bring up. Obviously, you don't need to memorize every single detail, but I would definitely say, like, make sure you know where you're applying, in the sense of, number one, or one of the reasons, and this is just to help you out, if they ask you why do you want to work at this particular firm, one of my go-to reasons is because of company culture. Like, I'm not going to apply just anywhere. And I think I learned that through this solicitor apprenticeship process. Every firm is extremely different. Their working environment it can be two opposite ends of the spectrum. Obviously, in all law firms, there's going to be some, like, degree of intense work. There's going to be some degree of intense deadlines and stress and all that kind of stuff. But what is their attitude towards work-life balance generally? Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I have all the other social links in the comment section.
Oh my gosh.
In the description down below. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.